Nathan Vargas turned 40 on a Tuesday, and the harvest ship came down through the clouds before he finished his coffee. He saw it the way you see weather, a shadow that wasn't there a moment ago, sliding across the kitchen tile, across the back of his hand, across the rim of the mug his daughter Mira had glued back together when she was 9. The mug had a hairline scar around it like a smile. He set it down very carefully, the way you set down something you do not want to drop, and walked to the window. The Valen ship hung over the orchard. It was the color of wet slate. It made no sound at all, which was somehow worse than thunder. In the kitchen behind him, his wife Sarah said, "Is it today, then?" Not a question. He'd known the date for 23 years, the way every human born after the compact knew the date. 40 rotations, and you went up. That was the deal. That was the price of the bread on the table, the unsalted ocean, the orchards full of stubborn apples, the fact that nobody on Earth had bombed anyone else in 2 decades because the Valen did not permit it. 40 years, and then you climbed the ramp, and the lights took you, and your atoms went into the great patient machinery in the sky, and Earth got to stay green. 40 years. They called it seeding. Nathan had always hated the word. A seed was something you put in the ground and waited for. He was not going into the ground. He was going into the sky. "Yeah," he said. "It's today." Sarah came up behind him and put her hand flat between his shoulder blades. Her palm was warm from the stove. He leaned back into it a half-inch, no more, because if he leaned any further, he would not be able to walk to the door. "Mira's coming?" he asked. "She's coming." "Good," he said. Then, because he could not help himself, "Tell her not to run on the gravel. She always runs on the gravel." Sarah made a sound that was almost a laugh. "She's 26, Nathan. She still runs on the gravel." Outside, the ship lowered a thin, pale ramp like a tongue. No Valen came down. They never did, not for this. They sent the ramp, and they waited. And at sundown, they took whoever was standing on it. If you weren't standing on it, they came and got you. And they were not gentle about it. And they took your family, too. Everyone had heard the stories. Everyone had a cousin who knew a cousin. Nathan poured the rest of his coffee down the sink. He rinsed the mug. He set it upside down on the towel where it always went. Small ceremonies. The mind invents them when the day is too big. The Valen had come down 43 years ago in the bad summer, when the rivers were running brown and 3 governments had nuclear codes resting on the same long table. The Valen had not said hello. They had simply switched off every warhead on the planet between one breath and the next, the way you would snuff a candle, and then they had broadcast on every frequency at once, in a voice that sounded like a cello, bowed underwater. "You are loud, T," the voice had said. "You are loud, and you are many, and you are killing the only world we have found that grows. We will quiet you. We will not kill you. We will husband you husband." That had been the word. Translators argued about it for a decade. The Valen used it the way a vineyard owner used it. Tend, prune, take the fruit at the proper season. The compact was simple. Humans could have Earth. They could have music and children and bread. They could have love. And they had been very specifically promised love, because the Valen had studied them and decided love was the part that made the fruit sweet. In exchange, every human went up at 40. Atoms reclaimed, mass returned. Population steady, world quiet. For 43 years it had worked. The forests came back. The bees came back. There were children again in the cities. In numbers, the old people wept to see. The Valen patrolled the high atmosphere in their slate-colored ships and harvested the 40th year crop without fuss. And humanity, exhausted and grateful and frightened, called it peace. Nathan had grown up calling it peace. He had voted for the candidates who said peace. He had taught his daughter the word the way his father had taught him. Peace, peace, peace. With the small, careful weight of a man laying a stone on top of something he does not want to come back up. He had been 38 when he started to hear the other word, underneath. Cattle, it came to him in the middle of ordinary days. He'd be wiring a transformer or kissing his wife or watching Mira shell peas at the table, and the word would arrive, very politely, in his ear. Cattle he had not told anyone. You did not tell anyone. But he had started quietly to take notes. He thought briefly of his brother Caleb. Caleb had not been seated. Caleb had been selected, which was a different word the Valen used, and which was supposed to be an honor. They took a few humans every year, a few hundred, out of the planetary harvest of millions, and they did not turn them into the compound. They sent them up instead. They sent them to the long places. The Valen called it the Engineering Corps, and Nathan's mother had cried for a week when the letter came, because cried was the only thing left to do, because the Engineering Corps did not come back. Caleb had been 24. He had been good with numbers in a way that Nathan, the patient practical brother, had never been. He had been the one who could look at a thing and see the 7 shapes underneath it. Nathan remembered the last dinner. Caleb had not wanted to eat. Their mother had set the table the way she set it for holidays, with the cloth and the candles and the heavy plates that came out twice a year. Caleb had picked up his fork and put it down again. He had said, "Mom, I'm not hungry." And their mother had said, very quietly, "Eat anyway, sweetheart." And Caleb had eaten anyway, slowly, methodically, every bite, because that was the price. After dinner, Caleb had taken Nathan out on the porch. He had been Nathan's older brother by 4 years, and he had treated this fact for 2.5 decades as a license, and on the porch that night he had treated it as a debt. "Listen," Caleb had said. "Listen, Nate, they told me a thing. I'm not supposed to tell you. I'm telling you anyway." "Okay." "They told me where they take us, the engineering ones. Not where they take the seated, I don't know about that, but us. They take us out to the long places to fix things. Pipes, reactors, big stuff. We're not pets, Nate. We're not what people say we are. They need us. They need our hands. They need the way our hands work." "Why didn't you say no?" Caleb had laughed. It had been a tired laugh. "Brother, you don't say no. You go and you do the work and you keep your eyes open. That's how you say no. That's the only way. You hear me?" "I hear you." "You hear me?" "I hear you, Caleb." Caleb had hugged him then, hard, the way he had not hugged him since they were boys, and the next morning he had walked up a ramp and the slate-colored door had closed behind him and the ship had risen, and that had been 16 years ago. Their mother had died 8 years after that, of a thing the doctors called a stroke and Nathan called grief. She had asked about Caleb on the last morning. Nathan had told her Caleb was fine. He had no way to know if Caleb was fine. He had told her anyway, because there are lies you tell on certain mornings, and you do not regret them. But Caleb's words had stayed. They need our hands. They need the way our hands work. A man who needs your hands is not the same as a man who owns you. A man who needs your hands has, somewhere inside him, a place he can be pressed. Nathan had remembered that for 16 years. He had remembered it in the workshop. He had remembered it last night, lying awake next to Sarah, watching the slow rise and fall of her shoulder in the dark, while the workshop signal sat coiled and finished, and waiting in the yellow folder under his bench. Mira arrived at 10 in the morning. She did run on the gravel. He heard it from the porch, and his chest did the bad thing it did now, the squeeze, and then she was through the screen door and into his arms before he could get his face right. "Dad," she said into his shoulder. "Hey, kid. Dad, I'm so." "Don't," he said. "Not yet. Later. After lunch. 'Kay?" She nodded against him. She was shaking, very lightly, like a tuning fork that had been struck a long time ago and never quite stopped. He held on a beat longer than he meant to, and then let go. Her partner Joel was behind her with a casserole dish. Joel was a good man. Nathan had decided that a year ago and had not revised the opinion. He was the kind of man who brought a casserole to a death. He nodded at Nathan, and Nathan nodded back, and that was all that needed saying. By noon, the house was full. Sarah's sister, 2 of Nathan's old engineering crew from the substation, Mira's friend Wen, who had been in and out of their kitchen since she was 11, Sarah's mother, who at 72 was a kind of celebrity in the neighborhood. Old people were rare now, and old people who had outlived the law were rarer still. She had been a child when the Valen came. The compact didn't apply to anyone born before. She drank her tea and watched Nathan with eyes that had seen the before time, and she did not say a word about the ship in the orchard, because she knew better than anyone what words were worth on a day like this. They ate, they told stories. Sarah had made the lamb because Nathan loved the lamb. Wen told the story about the time Nathan had tried to fix the kitchen sink and flooded the basement. And everyone laughed, and Mira laughed loudest, and Nathan watched her laugh and memorized it. He was memorizing everything today. The pattern on the curtain, the squeak in the 3rd floorboard, the exact way Sarah's hand fit into his when she passed him the bread. After a while, one of the old crew, Doyle, who had been wiring substations longer than Nathan had been alive, leaned back in his chair and looked across the table at Sarah's mother and said, with the kind of carefulness men used when they were about to ask a question they had been holding all their lives, "Ma'am, can I ask, what was it like before?" The whole table went still in a way nobody acknowledged. Sarah's mother looked at him for a long moment, then she set down her fork. "It was loud," she said. "That's what nobody who wasn't there ever quite gets. It wasn't bad and it wasn't good. It was loud. The cars were loud, and the radios were loud, and the news was loud, and there was always a war somewhere, and you were always hearing about it, and there was always a sale somewhere, and you were always hearing about that too. And the trees were dying very quietly underneath all of it, and nobody could hear that part. She took a sip of water. I was 11 the summer they came. We lived outside St. Louis. My father had a radio in the kitchen, and he kept it on all the time. And that summer, it was the warheads. It was the warheads every hour, every news cycle. India, Pakistan, the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese, the warheads on the long table. And my father would stand at the sink washing dishes and listening to the radio, and his hands would shake. I remember the shaking. I was 11, and I remember the shaking. She picked up her fork again. She did not eat. And then one afternoon, the radio just stopped. Not the station. The warheads. They cut to a commercial, and nobody said anything more about warheads. My father stood at the sink for a long time. He didn't turn around. Then he said very quietly, "Something's happened." And it had. The Valen had switched them all off, and we didn't know yet. And my father stood at the sink, and he started to cry. He cried because the warheads were off? Mira asked. He cried because somebody else had had to do it, her grandmother said. He cried because we hadn't. We hadn't been able to. We had been standing right there with the codes on the table for 80 years, and we hadn't been able to put them back in the box. And someone else had come along and put them in the box for us. And he cried because that meant we had failed at something. She looked at Nathan then, the long, careful look she had been not giving him all afternoon. He cried because he understood the bill was going to come, she said. And he was right. Nathan held her gaze. He understood. In a way he had not quite understood until that moment, what she had been doing in his kitchen all day. She had outlived the compact. She had been a child in the before time, and she was an old woman in the after time, and she was the only person at this table who had seen both sides of the bargain, and she had come to his birthday to tell him, without saying it, that the bargain had always been wrong. "Ma'am," he said. "Nathan, thank you for coming." "Of course, dear." Mira looked between them. She had not missed any of it. She was her father's daughter. She had never missed anything in her life. But she said nothing, because the day was too big for questions, and the answers, if she pulled on them, would unspool the whole afternoon. After lunch, he walked out to the orchard, alone. People let him go. They understood. The ramp was still down. The ship still hung in the air without any apparent reason for staying there. Nathan stopped 20 meters from the ramp and looked up at the underside of the ship and said, conversationally, "I have a question." Nothing answered. He hadn't expected anything to. "I know you can hear me. You can hear all of us all the time. So here's my question." He took a breath. "What do you do with us up there?" The ship was quiet. The afternoon was quiet. Somewhere a crow argued with another crow. "I don't believe you recycle our atoms," Nathan said to the slate-colored belly of the ship. "I think that's a story. I think you do something else with us, and I think you've been doing it for 43 years, and I think you're very good at it now." He waited. He had not really expected to be answered. He was a 40-year-old substation engineer from a town of 9,000 people, and he was talking to a thing the size of a cathedral, and the thing had no reason to talk back. But it did. "Engineer Vargas T," said the cello underwater voice, in his head and in the air at the same time. "Your suspicion is correct. We do not recycle. We harvest." Nathan did not move. He had known. He had known for 2 years. Hearing it confirmed was still like being slapped by a wet rope. "You are an excellent crop, T," the voice said, without anything that sounded like cruelty in it. "Your neural tissue, when properly cultured, produces a compound we cannot synthesize. We need it to live. We have always needed it." "We are sorry, Nathan repeated. "Yes, then stop." "We cannot stop. We would die." "You are kind, Engineer Vargas. You would not ask a starving creature to stop eating. I would ask it to eat something else. There is nothing else. Believe us." "We have looked for a long time." Nathan looked at the ship. The ship looked, in whatever way it looked, back. "How many of us?" he said. "Approximately 6 billion. Since the compact, he had to put a hand on the nearest tree. The bark was warm. An apple bumped his shoulder, and he caught a bite without thinking, and held it, and felt the small round weight of it in his palm. "Why tell me?" he said. "Why now?" "Because you asked, Teeth," the voice said. "And because in 4 hours you will be aboard. And it does not matter what you know." Nathan stood there a long time. The apple was warm from the sun. He could feel the seeds inside it, the small, stubborn architecture of the thing, the way it had been built to fall and start again. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." He walked back to the house. He did not tell Sarah. He did not tell Mira. He went upstairs to his workshop and he sat at the bench and he looked at the things he had collected very quietly over the last 2 years. Notes, diagrams, the signal logs from the substation, the strange harmonics he had noticed in the Valen ship's approach pattern, the way the slate-colored hulls seemed to flinch. There was no other word for it when certain frequencies crossed them. He had not known what he was building toward. He had been a man humming a tune he could not quite name. He knew the tune now. The Valen had told him their bodies could not survive without a human-derived compound. That meant their bodies were not invulnerable. That meant their bodies were, in some specific biological sense, dependent, and anything dependent could be denied. He thought about Mira running on the gravel. He thought about Sarah's mother, who had been a child in the before time, and who at 72 still drank her tea and watched the sky like a person watching weather. He thought about 6 billion. He went downstairs. He found Sarah in the kitchen, wiping the counter for the 4th time, because there was nothing else her hands knew how to do. "Sarah," he said, "I need you to do something for me." After. She turned. She had not been crying. She had been refusing to cry, which was harder. "Anything," she said. "In the workshop, top drawer of the bench, there's a folder. Yellow. I need you to give it to Wen. Not Mira. Wen knows people in the broadcast guild. Tell her to read what's in it and decide for herself. If she decides to send it out, she sends it out. If she decides to burn it, she burns it. It's her call. Not yours, not Mira's, Wen's." Sarah looked at him a long time. "What's in the folder, Nathan?" "A reason," he said. She did not ask which kind. She nodded once and folded the dishcloth and put it on the rack. "Okay," she said. "Sarah, yeah, don't read it first." "I wasn't going to," she said, which was a lie they both pretended she had not told. At 4 in the afternoon, Nathan walked out into the orchard with his wife and his daughter on either side of him, and Joel and Wen and Sarah's mother, and the rest of them following behind. And Sarah's mother had a cane now, though she usually refused to use it, and she used it today, the small, dignified talk of it on the gravel, and Mira did not run. They stopped at the edge of the ramp. He turned to Mira first. He had thought all day about what to say. He had drafted speeches in his head while the lamb cooled. None of them had survived contact with her face. "Hey," he said. "Hey, Dad, listen. When you were 9, you glued my mug back together. Remember? The handle had broken off, and I was going to throw it out, and you took it and you glued it back together in secret and gave it back to me at breakfast." She was crying now, very quietly. "That mug is still in the kitchen," Nathan said. "It still works. You did that, okay? You did that. Things that look broken aren't always done. You remember that for me. Dad, you remember that for me. Promise. I promise." He held her face in his hands for a second, the way he had held it when she was small and feverish and frightened, and then he let go. He turned to Sarah. He did not say anything for a moment, because there was nothing he could say that she did not already know. 22 years of marriage had used up most of the words. What was left was just the looking. He looked. She looked back. "The folder," he said, quietly enough that only she heard. "I'll bring it to Wen tonight." "Good. Nathan, yeah." "Come back," she said. It was a stupid thing to say. They both knew it was stupid. She said it anyway. "However you can. Come back." He kissed her. Then he turned, and he walked up the ramp, and he did not look back, because he had promised himself he would not look back, because if he looked back, he would not be able to do what he had decided in the workshop to do. The ramp drew up behind him. The slate-colored door closed without a sound. The ship rose. Inside, the ship was bright, brighter than he had expected. The walls glowed a soft, neutral white, like the inside of a clean shell. There were no Valen visible. There never were. The harvest was automated for the same reason a slaughterhouse was automated. The workers preferred not to see. He was led. By what? He could not say. The floor seemed to suggest, very politely, which way to walk into a small round room. There was a chair. There was a tray of something that looked like water and probably wasn't. There was a soft hum that made his back teeth itch. "Engineer Vargas T," the voice said. "Please be seated. The process will take 17 minutes." He sat. He drank nothing. "Can I ask you something?" he said. You're hearing my thoughts, right? You've been hearing them all day." "Yes, then you know what I'm going to do." There was a pause. The first real pause he had heard from the voice all day. "We know," T had said. "We have considered it. We have decided to allow it." Nathan blinked. "Allow it?" "Yes, why?" "Because we have considered 6 billion, T, the voice said, and we have considered ourselves, and we have decided that the question of which of us deserves to continue is not one we are qualified to answer alone. We have been answering it alone for a very long time. We are tired." He sat with that. You could have stopped this any time, he said. 43 years. Yes. Why didn't you? Because we are afraid to die, Engineer Vargas. We are very, very afraid to die. We have made ourselves not think about what we do, because to think about it would be to stop, and to stop would be to die. We have built a great machine of not thinking. You are the small, stubborn thing that came in through the seam. Nathan looked at his hands. They were shaking. He noticed this with something like surprise. That's not an excuse, he said. No, T, the voice agreed. It is not. He sat in the chair in the bright round room and he thought about how much time he had. 17 minutes was not a long time. 17 minutes was the length of a phone call with his daughter when she was at college. 17 minutes was how long it took to drive to the substation from his house. 17 minutes was nothing. Tell me something, he said. Yes, my brother Caleb. You took him 16 years ago. He was selected. Is he alive? There was the small pause again. The voice when it returned was quieter. Yes. Engineer Caleb Vargas is alive. He's on Vielresh, the 6th station. He has been instrumental in the redesign of our hull integrity systems. He is, by our standards, an exceptional craftsman. He has asked about you 17 times in 16 years. Nathan put his face in his hands. He was crying, he discovered, in the small, efficient way of men who had practiced not crying for a long time. He asked about me. Yes, you never told him anything. We told him you were well. We will continue to tell him so. That's a lie. Yes, the voice said. Many of the things we have told you both have been lies. We have done this for the same reason. The cattleman tells the calf the field is large. He took his hands away from his face. He breathed once, slowly, the way he had been taught to breathe when he was a boy, and his father had been teaching him how to wire a hot circuit. Slow, his father had said. Slow hands. Slow breathing. Panic kills more men than current does. Show me him, Nathan said. Engineer Vargas, we cannot. You can show me him. I know you can. You're in my head. You can put a picture in there. Show me my brother. I have 11 minutes. Show me my brother. A long pause. Long enough that Nathan thought it had decided against him. Then the bright round room dimmed, and the wall in front of him became, very gently, a window. Caleb was older. That was the first thing. His hair was nearly gone on top, and his beard was streaked with white, and he was wearing a kind of one-piece working coverall the color of unbleached linen, and he was bent over a long, pale piece of machinery with a tool in his hand that Nathan did not recognize. There were 2 Valens standing near him. They were smaller than Nathan would have expected, the way the one outside Argentina would later be smaller than anyone expected. They came up only to Caleb's hip. They were watching him work the way an apprentice watches a master. Caleb was humming. Nathan could hear it. It was the tune their mother used to hum while she did the dishes. An old song, older than the compact, older than any of them. Caleb was humming it under his breath while he worked on Valen machinery in a room on a station at the 6th long place. And the 2 Valen near him were tilting their heads in the small way the Valen tilted their heads when they were trying to understand something. And Caleb did not seem to know they were there. Nathan watched him for a long minute. He memorized everything. The lines at the corner of Caleb's eye. The way he held the tool, the same way he had held his pencil when he did his sums at the kitchen table as a boy. The hum. Tell him, Nathan said. When you can, tell him I tried something. Tell him I was scared, but I tried something. Tell him our mother died well. Tell him I named my daughter after our grandmother. Tell him. His voice broke. He waited it out. Tell him the mug is still on the shelf. We will tell him, T, the voice said. Engineer Vargas, we will tell him. The window went dark. The wall was a wall again. How long do I have? Nathan said. 9 minutes. Okay, Engineer Vargas, yeah. We are sorry. For what it is worth at this moment, we are sorry. I know you are, Nathan said. That's the worst part. I'd rather you weren't. He had built the signal in the workshop over 2 years out of off-the-shelf parts, and the harmonics he had stolen from the substation logs. It was not a weapon. It was a tone. A single very specific frequency that the Valen hulls flinched from, scaled up and modulated and tuned the way a man tunes a violin, riding on every public broadcast band at once. It would not hurt them. It would only do one thing. It would wake them up. It would override the great machine of not thinking, the careful neural lullaby they had built into themselves over 43 years to make the harvest survivable for their own consciences. It would put the 6 billion back into their heads. It would make them remember. What they did after that, whether they died of grief, or stopped harvesting and starved, or found some third thing, was not up to him. It was up to them. The point was that they would have to choose awake, in the daylight of their own minds, the way humans had been forced to choose for 43 years. The folder in his workshop contained the schematic, the frequency, and a note that said, in his careful engineer's print, "Send this, or don't. I cannot make this decision for you. I am only making sure you can." He had not told the Valen about the folder. The Valen had been in his head all day, and they had not asked about the folder, because they had not wanted to know. He thought, very clearly, when he thought, the folder he thought, send it. There was a long silence in the round, bright room. "Aye," the shallow underwater voice said, with something that sounded almost like a smile in it. "You did not bring the signal with you. You left it on the ground, yes." "Clever, Engineer Vargas, not really," he said. "I just didn't trust myself not to flinch." The 17 minutes passed. Down on the ground, in a small house in a small town, Sarah walked into the workshop and opened the top drawer of the bench and took out the yellow folder. She did not read it. She had promised. She walked across the orchard in the long blue dusk to Wynn's car. Wynn was already in the driver's seat. They did not say anything to each other. Sarah handed her the folder. Wynn put it on the passenger seat and drove. Mira watched her go from the porch. Sarah's mother stood beside her, both hands on the cane now, looking up at the ship in the sky as it rose past the first stars. "He did something, didn't he?" Mira said quietly. "Yes," her grandmother said. "He did. Will it work?" The old woman was silent for a long time, watching the slate-colored shape climb. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said, "but he tried. He tried something. That's the part you remember. Not whether it worked. Whether he tried." 3 days later, on every public broadcast band on Earth, at 4:17 in the afternoon local time wherever you were, a single tone played for 9 seconds. It did not sound like much. People in cars turned up the radio and frowned and turned it back down. People in kitchens stopped chopping for a moment and then resumed. Birds, for some reason, went quiet. In the high atmosphere, the slate-colored ships flinched. Wen had not slept in 2 nights. She had taken the folder home, and she had opened it on her kitchen table, and she had read the schematic, and then she had read it again, and then she had read the note at the bottom in Nathan's careful engineer's print, the part that said, "I cannot make this decision for you. I am only making sure you can." And she had sat with the folder open in front of her for a very long time. She was 31. She had known Nathan since she was 11. She had broken her arm in his orchard once. Climbing a tree she had been told not to climb. And Nathan had carried her 3/4 of a mile to the truck, with her face mashed into his shoulder, and her arm not screaming because he had wrapped it in his shirt and tied it tight with 2 of his shoelaces. He had not told her she was stupid. He had not told her parents she had climbed the tree she had been told not to climb. He had said, on the drive to the hospital, "Things heal, kiddo. Mostly they heal. The trick is to not be too proud to ask for the cast." She had been 11 years old. She had remembered it for 20 years. He had given her the folder, she understood, because he trusted her to ask for the cast. He had given her the folder because she had been the only person at the lunch who had laughed loudest about the basement flood. And Nathan Vargas had spent a lifetime watching very carefully who laughed at what. She had a friend in the Broadcast Guild named Tomas. Tomas had a habit of saying yes to things. Tomas also had a habit, less commonly known, of saying no to the things that mattered. She thought about Tomas for a long time. She thought about 6 billion. She thought about Mira, who was her oldest friend, and whose father was somewhere above them right now in a slate-colored ship, and whose face on the porch yesterday had been the face of a person who had already been told no for the rest of her life. She closed the folder. She picked it up. She drove to Tomas's apartment at 3 in the morning, and she knocked on his door until he opened it, and she handed him the folder, and she said, "Read this. Then decide. Then call me." Tomas read it. Tomas called her back at 6 in the morning. Tomas said one word, which was yes. The broadcast went out at 4:17 the next afternoon. By then, 47 other engineers in 19 countries had been quietly pulled into the chain, because that was how things spread when they were the right size, when they fit through the right kind of seam. The signal rode every band at once, 9 seconds, a single tone. In the high atmosphere, the slate-colored ships flinched, and then they remembered. What they remembered was 6 billion, not as a number, not as a statistic on a clean white panel, as faces, as names, as small voices. 6 billion of them that they had been pretending for 43 years did not exist. The lullaby of not thinking failed in 9 seconds, and the great patient machinery in the sky went quiet, and the Valen in their ships sat in their own minds with all the math suddenly running the right way for the first time in 2 human generations. Some of them, the records would later show, simply died of it. They went into a state the medics would call cascade grief, and their small pale bodies trembled and stilled. And that was that. A great many. Tens of thousands. The Valen lost more of themselves to the broadcast than any human had ever quite let themselves understand. They had not been monsters. That was the part that had taken the long room in the bright ship 17 minutes to admit. They had been frightened and small and very good at not looking, and when they had finally been made to look, they had not all survived it, but most did. Most survived. And one by one, all over the world, they began to land. Not to harvest, to land. To set down in fields and parking lots and the long flat tops of buildings, very gently, the way a tired animal lies down. The ramps lowered, and for the first time in 43 years, the Valen came down them. They were small. That was the first surprise. They were small and pale and trembling, and they walked on 6 legs that did not look strong enough for what they had been carrying, and the first one to step off a ramp. In a field outside a town in what had once been Argentina, looked at the human standing 20 meters away, and made a sound that the translators would later argue about for a decade. The sound, most of them eventually agreed, was a word in the Valen language that did not have a clean human equivalent, but came close to. Forgive, or possibly, begin. Sarah kept the mug. The one with the hairline scar around it like a smile, the one Mira had glued back together when she was 9. She kept it on the shelf above the sink where Nathan had always kept it, and she drank her coffee from it every morning for the rest of her life. She lived to be 91. She saw the first Valen child born on Earth in a hospital in Lagos to a Valen mother who had asked, in the new common language, for a human midwife. She saw the orchard outlive her. She saw Mira's son turn 40 on a Tuesday and go to work at the substation and come home and eat lamb, and no ship came down through the clouds, and no ramp opened. And the boy turned 41 the next year, which had not happened to anyone in his family in 3 generations. On the last morning of her life, very early, she made coffee in the kitchen, and she carried the mug out to the porch, and she sat in Nathan's chair, and she watched the orchard come awake. A crow argued with another crow. She lifted the mug. Her hand was steady. "Hey, kid," she said, to no one in particular, to the orchard, to the morning, to the man who had walked up a ramp 48 years ago and not looked back. "We're still here." She drank her coffee. The mug, with its small, careful scar, held.